Welcome to 10 for 10, a series of interviews with personalities and dedicated leaders across the Major Arena Soccer League, which is celebrating its 10th anniversary. I'm your host, Eric Bergrud. For our initial episode, I'm joined by Keith Tozer, whose more than 45 years of indoor soccer experience has been punctuated by success as a player, coach, and now as MASL commissioner. Welcome to 10 for 10, Keith.
Eric, it's great to be on the show. It's great to see you.
Thank you. Likewise. Keith, I want to take you back to 1978 when you became the first player selected in the original Major Indoor Soccer League draft. As a member of the Cincinnati Kids, you played in the inaugural game on December 22nd of that year against league president Shep Messing and the New York Arrows, the original dynastic indoor soccer franchise. Other than the size of the goals back then, which are much larger today, what strikes you as the major differences and similarities between the indoor soccer of 1978 and that of today?
Well, obviously, the game is very exciting. Back then, goalkeeping was fantastic. Obviously, Shep in that first game kind of set the bar pretty high. Goal scoring was fantastic. You had Sengoda and Zungle, and today you got Ian Bennett and Frank Tau and Zach Regret. You got great franchises that were back then and still now, like Kansas City Comets, San Diego Soccer's, Tacoma Stars, and of course new ones like the Milwaukee Wave. And of course, you can't forget the Baltimore Blast. So there's been so many great things that have continued from the past, but there's so many new things that came. We started with only one referee. I believe that was Gino DiPolito who reffed that first game. Joe Macknick was the head of referees on the sidelines. Now we have two referees. We got a great referee department. So it's great to be back involved with Shep and JP. We love the game of indoor.
What did it feel like walking into an arena on a game night back then? And what does it feel like today?
I remember I always wanted to play in Madison Square Garden because I grew up in New York. I was a hockey player. And of course, I never thought I'd ever be there, obviously, as a hockey player. But we went in there with the Hartford Hinds to play the New York Arrows. And that was unbelievable to be part of that game in Madison Square Garden. Just last night, I was in the Milwaukee Wave at Panther Arena. That excitement, that energy, the goal saves, the goal scoring. When you go to San Diego, when you go to Baltimore, when you go to Kansas City, all the other great teams, it's similar. It feels like, in years past, a little bit different though, but the feeling's still there. The excitement is definitely still there.
Keith, among other distinctions, you're the winningest coach in indoor soccer history. What is the typical day in the life of an indoor soccer coach?
Well, I think it's like any other sports. You got to be dedicated, you got to be passionate, and you got to be committed. I would get up very early and get the kids off to school, and I'd always get to the facility at least an hour early. They set up the field. The players who weren't playing that much, I always had a training session with them prior. I always had the players come early, at least 15 minutes. When you're early, you're on time. When you're on time, you're late. Our sessions always lasted 2 hours most of the time, a lot of film sessions. We really like to sweat the details, and that's what we did. All the little things that makes good players great and the little things that make good teams champions was really focused on. So really it was 24/7 for me. It was difficult at times. As you know, you got to deal with a lot of different things, but my passion is to teach, and it was an honor to be able to coach so many years in the league.
Can you describe to our viewers what it feels like to lift a championship trophy as a player and as a coach?
Well, I don't know how it is as a player because I've never won a championship as a player, but as a coach, it was fantastic, Eric. They're kind of like children. I remember the first one, which never thought we would get one, right? That was like the newborn baby. It's like, oh my God, it was just fantastic. And it's like all that hard work. We always said, where do we win games at? And we always said we win games at the training facility. And because people always said that the Wave could never get to the finals. We always petered out. And all of a sudden here, we're a champion. And once a champion, always a champion. Then we won another one. Then we won another one. Then we won another one. And then they said that we're a dynasty. It's kind of weird, right? You went from not being anything to being a champion to being dynasty. Then we lost in a final. The following year, lost in a final. The following year, they lost in a final. And I remember Bill Clement from the National Hockey Live on ESPN said, if we lose in this fourth championship, we're the Buffalo Bills of the NFL. And I'm like, wait a minute, we've won 4 already. And we went down 5-1 in that game. And we were all upset that, they were calling us, we're washed up. We were losing 5-1. We came back, won 6-5. Johnny Torres in overtime. Then we went on to St. Louis and we won another championship and then beat Baltimore at home and then beat Baltimore away. But they're all like different kids. They're different journeys. Before we were the hunters, then we became the hunted. And when you're the hunted, you got every game is a playoff game. And it was fun to do it. I mean, it was a great journey and surrounded by so many great people and players and staff.
For much of the Major Arena Soccer League's early years, you watched the league from afar, having retired as coach of the Milwaukee Wave. What were your perceptions of the MASL from the outside, and what made you interested in becoming commissioner?
Well, as you know, I've always loved the game. So I watched a lot of games when I left. I traveled the world. I started learning more about my craft, more about teaching, more about indoor, more about futsal. And once you love something, you always love something, right? So Shep, JP, and I have stayed friends for 45 years. And when the opportunity to go after the commissioner's job as a group of 3, a trio, which was really interesting, and then divided up, I couldn't have asked for 2 better guys. Obviously, John Raymond was already in the league, and he's a fantastic guy. I brought in Rob and Lindsay and the other group, but it was just really good to be back in indoor, and maybe it was good to get away from indoor a little bit to take a perspective of what you have, because you really don't know what you have until you don't have it anymore. But it's been great to be back.
Some of your former players, including UCFC's Everton, Milwaukee's Giuliano Oliveira, Dallas's Eddie Piscarich, Tacoma's Nick Pereira, Baltimore's David Bascom, and Empire's Paul Wright, are current MASL head coaches. Do you take satisfaction in having passed the torch to a new generation?
Eric, I just got chills right from this. This is probably one of the most things I'm proud of, is these players that have gone on to become great coaches. I tell Everton and I tell Giuliano, I guess you guys must have been listening, right? So I see some similarities. Obviously, they're their own men, they're their own coaches. But to turn on Twitch or go to a stadium and see one of my ex-players, or like last night in Milwaukee, to see 2 ex-players battle against each other as 2 head coaches in the league, I couldn't be more prouder. And just recently, Mike Noonan, who played for me in Louisville, he just won the national championship at Clemson University. So I couldn't be more proud of all the men and also the women that were on our staff that have come through the doors of wherever I've been able to be lucky enough to coach at. So I have great pride in that.
How do you see the future of indoor soccer unfolding, and what role do you envision the MASL playing in shaping that future?
Well, I think it's a great opportunity for the MASL right now with the World Cup coming and everything else that's coming with outdoor. Major League Soccer has grown. USL has grown. I think indoor soccer has its place. I mean, one of the first things that we talked about, Shep, JP, and I, is how do we get the indoor soccer back into the conversation. Hence, went to the USC Coaches Convention. We just returned last week. Strikers played the Sockers at an exhibition game inside the convention. We got a player combine. I watched Colin O'Keefe play last night, who came from the combine. We have a college draft. We have players from that are playing. I think we've done a really good job of getting indoor soccer back into the conversation. I think there's a huge market for indoor, and I think you'll see bigger and better things coming in the future.
Final question. If you had to pick your favorite moment of the MASL's first 10 years, what would it be and why?
Wow, that's a great question. There are so many great moments. I think when you have teams like St. Louis and Shelley, who leads, the ambush, and Jeff Locker came on board with Shelley, to see them build their franchise, their membership the way they have, and like all the other teams, I think that's great. The team, the business side of it, obviously, for us has now been really important, as well as the competition. to see young coaches like Eddie Puskarich come back to the sport, come back to the league. They have guys like Giuliano, who's been in the sport, or Phil Savaggio, or David Pascome, and I don't want to slight anybody, Tattoo. I think that's been great. And we got great ownership. I mean, look at Jeff Burham, now president of the exec committee out in Empire. Of course, you got, Bud and Lane and Ed and Mike Zimmerman in Baltimore, our partners in Mexico. It's really a wonderful group of people, and I think there's a big future for the Major Arena Soccer League, I think in the next 15 to 20 years.
Great. Thank you for your time, Keith, and thanks to each of you for joining us. We will be back soon with another 10 for 10 interview.
Thanks, Eric.